One of the things many artists struggle with is painting trees. So in this video, I'm going to show you a simplified way that you can paint beautiful trees in your landscape paintings. And what I've done is I've decided to go outside and paint some trees from life. And I'm going to be painting this poplar tree here. And even though this is an outdoor painting, the techniques that I'm using are just as applicable to studio work. And I hope that it demonstrates that you don't need to paint every single leaf and twig in order to communicate a realistic looking tree. Alright, so I found a spot that I want to paint. It's in my local area up in Northland, New Zealand. It's a little bit windy today, but I reckon it should be okay. Hopefully my easel won't blow over. But I'm going to paint that scene behind me, just a nice simple scene with a road, and I really like that big poplar tree there, so I'm going to get into it. So despite the fact that it was blooming windy, I didn't let that deter me from painting outdoors. Now I'm painting on an 8" by 10" linen canvas panel made by Source Tech, and the link's in the description box below. And I'm using an alla prima perchard box, which is ideal for painting outdoors. And again, I've put a link in the description box below. Now I sketched out my composition using burnt sienna mixed with some liquid original. I'm using oil paint, so the liquid original is going to speed up the drying time. And this is ideal for when you're painting outdoors. The brand of oil paint I'm using is Blue Ridge oils. These are an artist quality oils, absolutely ideal for painting outdoors and in the studio. And if you want to get some of them, I've put a link in the description box below. Now then, on to the painting. So the first thing that I do when painting trees, or indeed painting any landscape, is to paint the dark values first. So painting the shadow areas here in the tree in this case. And I've mainly used a mix of ultramarine blue with a little bit of yellow ochre, so it produces this really dark green, low saturation colour. So that's another thing we need to think about, as well as the tonal values, is the saturation of the colours that we're using. Now, as I said, I'm painting the darks first, and what this allows me to do is it helps me to create a tonal dynamic in the painting, making it much easier to paint the areas in light. Especially as I'm painting outdoors, if I get the darks in first, it doesn't matter that the light changes or suddenly the sun disappears behind the clouds, which is what happened in this case. So as I say, painting the darks first just creates this framework. Now when it comes to painting trees, I'm not going to be painting every single individual leaf. In fact, that's really not what you want to do at all. If you want to create convincing looking trees, we want to simplify them. And as I say, first of all, I've just started off by painting the main shadows in the trees, and I'm using a number 5 brittle flat brush. Now at this stage of my plein air painting, I'm trying to use the biggest brushes that I can get away with, so mainly number 5 brittle flat brushes, and just marking in those main shadows and various forms within the landscape. So for example, I painted the cloud shadows with a mix of ultramarine blue, a little burnt sienna, which helps to desaturate the blue because burnt sienna is a dark orange and orange is opposite to blue on the colour wheel. Then I mixed in some titanium white and a little bit of alizarin crimson, and I've used the same colour mix for the shadows in the pathway but with less titanium white. Now, one of the many reasons that people struggle with trees is because they're not thinking about the values, and value is how light or dark your subject is. So the general rule with trees is they're some of the darkest values to be found in the landscape, especially conifer trees. Now here I'm painting a black poplar, which is obviously a deciduous tree, and it's in spring, as it's springtime here in New Zealand at the time of making this video. But we're still dealing with some reasonably dark greens, so for the tree canopy that's in light, I've used a mix of yellow ochre with a little cadmium yellow medium, some ultramarine blue, this serves the base of my green. Then I've mixed in some titanium white, and I've also added in a little bit of cobalt teal and rounded it off with some burnt sienna. So the burnt sienna is just adding a red element to it that's just going to harmonise the green. So if your greens are looking a bit whacked out and a bit neon, then really what it needs often is a colour opposite, i.e. something that contains red, and that's just going to tone that green down and make it look more natural. Also mixing in titanium white's just going to desaturate the green as well. Now when it comes to painting something like grass, for example, normally that's a much lighter value to be found in the landscape. One of the things I've found with trees or deciduous trees that are in spring is quite often the value of the leaves is lighter than when they're in full leaf in summer. And as I said, trees are some of the darkest values in the landscape. So in painting the poplar tree here and painting the areas in light, I was just marking in brush strokes, and I'm thinking of the trees as masses rather than thinking about all the individual leaves here. The other thing I can do to help form the tree is paint the negative spaces around it, such as the sky that I'm painting. I just added the highlights to the clouds, which was a mix of titanium white with a little burnt sienna, and then I paint the sky itself with a mix of ultramarine blue, some titanium white and a little cobalt teal. You could use phthalo green instead of cobalt teal instead if you wanted to. At the moment I'm just trying to get as much paint down and get the canvas covered, and then I can start adding a few little details and refine a few areas in the painting. One thing about painting outdoors is you want to paint quickly, and this is because the light changes and often the weather's changing. And at the time of painting this I could see these really dark clouds coming and I was wondering if it was going to rain, not to mention it was blowing a gale. I'm amazed my pochade box didn't blow over in the wind. So even though it's spring here in far north New Zealand, it's a bit chilly because of the wind, and I've been having to hold on to my pochade box easel as well. But that's as far as I've got at the moment. I just want to get it finished because it does look like it's going to rain. Now, in view of the threat of the weather closing in, I really had to think about getting this painting finished, but there's still quite a bit of work to do on the tree. Now, as I said before, I'm not focusing on painting every single leaf and branch. Instead, I'm thinking of the overall tree canopy as just a large mass. So next, what I was doing was I was applying some more green, but this time making this layer a little bit lighter in value. I'm also starting to use some synthetic flat brushes as opposed to the bristle flat brushes for some finer marks, so I can paint the suggestion of some leaves but not with any real detail. So another way to make trees look more rounded and realistic is to start off with your darker layers first and then build up the lighter tone within the tree canopy. So I'm still essentially using the same green mix as I was a moment ago, but there's just more titanium white in the mix, and I've also needed to readjust the saturation of the colour, so I can do this by adding some more cadmium yellow medium, for example. Now, if you're an artist that's struggling with your landscape painting and you're having difficulty creating depth and distance, or having difficulty with your colour mixing, composition and tonal values, and you just want to be able to paint beautiful pictures that you could hang on your wall or potentially sell, then check out my free landscape painting blueprint. It's going to help you take your landscape painting to the next level. Just click the link in the description box below. Now then, let's check in on the weather. Yeah, I really just want to get this painting finished now. I'm getting pretty cold. This is the joys of painting outdoors. It's sunny 1 minute and then suddenly it's raining and it's been super windy, so I just want to get this done now. I'm hoping it will ease off in a sec, but we'll see. Now at this point it was getting windy, I could feel it was starting to rain as well, and I was getting cold, so I was really rushing to try and get this finished. And that's the thing about painting outdoors, it does teach you to paint quickly. In hindsight I would have liked to have spent longer on this painting, but right towards the end it really started raining, so I didn't get as much time on this as I'd liked. But never mind. But what I'm doing here at this point is just restating some of these dark values in the painting, so mainly the shadow areas of these trees. For this large poplar tree that's in the foreground, I wanted to paint the suggestion of some reflected light in the shadow areas, so I still used a mix of ultramarine blue with a little yellow ochre, but also mixed in a small amount of cobalt teal and just a little bit of burnt sienna for some red elements in there. The tree was almost finished, and I wanted to just add a bit of detail into the foreground and midground here, so the suggestion of some of this dead grass. Then tidy up the shadows in the foreground, and the next thing I did was to paint some of the highlights in the tree stems, especially the tree trunks, and I used a number 3 synthetic flat brush for some more chiseled marks. I also painted the suggestion of this fence that's helping to lead the eye towards the tree and along the gravel road here. So I was starting to add more details and just add some more interest to the painting overall. Now, as this is a outdoor painting, also known as painting on plein air, they generally don't have a lot of detail in them. In fact, it lends itself to a loose impressionistic style, so I'm not going to be going overboard with the detail. But I was just adding little bits of suggestions of details here and there just to make the overall artwork more engaging and interesting. And then one of the last things to do was to do some more work on this tree. So I was just adding more to the tree canopy, especially in the shadow areas, just making it look like some of those leaves are drooping down. And then painting things like sky holes as well, which again helps with the overall form of the tree canopy. Okay, so as you can see, I'm nearly got this finished, but it's starting to rain. Not good. I'm actually getting pretty cold as well. Now, this is one of the realities of painting outdoors, that the weather changes quickly and it starts raining, gets cold, wind picks up, and this was the case here. You can start seeing that some of the rain is hitting the lens of my camera, so I really just wanted to get this painting finished. And I was just adding some more layers of paint to the tree canopy overall, just helping to bulk it out. And again, it just goes to show that you don't need to be painting every single leaf on there, but just the suggestion of clumps of leaves and treating the trees as a solid mass actually goes a long way to communicating realistic looking trees. So we're going for realism here, even if we're not detailed. Now, as you can see from the camera lens here, it was really starting to pelt it down with rain, and it was actually making the painting process difficult. I really wanted to spend at least probably another 20 minutes to half an hour just on the tree and just tidying up the overall areas in the painting. But with the rain, it was just starting to make the painting process very difficult, so I really had to think about getting it finished and packing up. However, regardless, I still really enjoyed this painting session and painting outdoors, and I can still use this painting for a colour study for a potential studio painting, and I took a load of photos at the start before it clouded over. Hope you enjoyed this video, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.